But the question was basically like, this person is coming into fighting games, and I think they come into fighting games the way most people these days get into fighting games, which is to say they know they might watch a video or two, they might get kind of intrigued, and then they look up how to do something, which is not it's not a bad idea, right? Oh, how do I get into this game or that game? And it's a pattern that that a lot of people learn coming from games, especially games that are a little bit slower, right? Like you don't want to take the time to learn kind of organically and naturally, because you know that's going to be a slower way to get good than if you just if you just Google it, right? And to be honest, especially if you're working in like a knowledge work field, if you have to work with a computer and an internet connection for your day job, you probably do a lot of just Googling it. And so it makes sense that you would apply that same mentality to fighting games. And so this person asks, like, as a beginner, it sounds really appealing to try and find as many different games to find what I like. But I know that it is better to stick to one in order to learn the fundamentals, right? Look at the conviction with which this person writes this, right? So my question is, if I find several games appealing for several different reasons, how do I know which one I should spend more time in order to learn fighting game fundamentals? Is it bad to jump one and the other in this beginner stage? And it's an interesting question, but you kind of start with the premise. It is better to stick to one game in order to learn the fundamentals. That is generally speaking not true, which is why I made this dumbass graph down here, this Venn diagram chart, right? Like, whenever someone in a fighting game says something is bullshit, they're usually just referring to something that is more or less a property of that specific fighting game, right? Elfelt is bullshit because Elfelt is not in any other fighting game. No other fighting game could have prepared me for Elfelt. And so when I run into Elfelt for the first time, this is actually what I felt when I ran into Elfelt the first time, and the 1500th. I was like, man, this character is bullshit. But if it's something that I know already, so from playing fighting game B, well, that's fundamentals, right? And the way that people end up learning fighting games a lot of time is the first game you play, when you have no preconceptions about what a fighting game should be, is that everything in that fighting game, if you like it, is good. And then the moment you play a different game, you look at stuff that you don't recognize and you're like, wow, this is bullshit. There's no fundamentals involved, right? Well, the reality is, I think this is actually accurate, right? Is that whatever we call fighting game fundamentals are usually going to be the set of skills and tests that are shared by multiple fighting games. And so if you want to learn multiple fighting games, or if you want to learn fundamentals, you actually get a better sense of that playing multiple fighting games than you do from playing just one, right? And this might be surprising to some people because, again, if they've internalized the attitude that focusing on one game is the best way to optimize for progress, right? Because you get to spend all your time on that game, you get to go deeper in it, blah, 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 blah. Then it must be that spending all your time on one game instead of spreading your attention on others is also the best way to cultivate a strong base of fundamental skill. But it's actually not true. And it's always really funny to me to see the people who learn to play just one fighting game, because they end up having a remarkably different experience than what I did. When I started playing fighting games, I came up in kind of the last gasp of the arcade era, right? And so I would go to the arcade because I wanted to play CVS2. But if no one was there playing CVS2, or maybe actually if the line was too long, then I would go play other games as well. And I would play just about anything. I would play Tekken, I would play Third Strike, I'd play ST, I'd play Marvel 2. I wasn't good at any of these games. I wasn't really even good at CVS2, but it didn't matter. I was there to play fighting games. When I got a win, I felt good. I felt like I learned something, right? And the important thing here, and this is something that I didn't think of at the time, like I just wanted to play fighting games. But the important thing here is I didn't think of myself as just a CVS2 player. I thought of myself as a fighting game player, and all the different games are getting me good at different aspects of fighting games, right? Yes, CVS2 is the one I cared about the most, but it wasn't like I only valued my progress in CVS2. There would be some times where I'd spend a week or two more focused on Marvel 2 because that was the thing that I wanted to learn in that moment, right? The other thing is, and I cannot stress this enough, thinking about learning fighting game fundamentals is overrated. And trust me, I wrote a book to try and teach people fighting game fundamentals, right? The downside to this kind of approach, and I think I understand why people recommend this, right? They recommend it because they think of their path to getting good at fighting games. Let's say it took them 2,000 hours before they even started to feel remotely competent at fighting games, right? Well, some of that time was probably spent suboptimally, right? Working on stuff that you didn't need to learn or whatever. And there's a lot of stuff to learn in fighting games. And so it can be really tempting to look back in hindsight and think, oh man, if only I had known the right way to learn all these things, then I would have been so much better now than I was before, right? And so when someone else is getting into fighting games, you give them that information, you give them the benefit of your hindsight to try and speed their learning process along like you wish someone had done for you. This doesn't actually work. And the reason it doesn't actually work for most people is because learning that way is not fun. The kinds of things you're willing to tolerate as someone who is invested in this game and has already spent 2,000 hours just simply are generally not the kinds of things that you're willing to tolerate if you are new to fighting games and still trying to kind of figure your way out, right? And the way I describe it in the essay is that, like, if Daniel LaRusso in The Karate Kid, I'm going to assume y'all have seen that movie, or at the very least in Cobra Kai, but he learns karate through washing Mr. Miyagi's car and painting his fence, right? Cars and fence. And that's great for a movie, but most people, especially in their downtime, if they're trying to unwind and play a video game, are not down for that shit, right? So overall, I just generally don't recommend the approach of like, oh, you got to sit down, you got to study your B&Bs, and you got to, you got to start playing against people as soon as you can, and blah, 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 blah. And that actually brings me to, so the rest of this essay is basically about why I think it's valuable for a beginner to play multiple fighting games at once and some tips on how to do it, because there are downsides, right? And the main downside is, if you are used to a game that is kind of spoon feeding you the feeling of progression, right? Irene's been playing Call of Duty lately, and I swear to God, every time I look over, there's something flashing saying, good job, you did the thing. You unlocked this new thing. And then a little progress bar goes, bleep, right? And I can just see the reward mechanisms in her brain going like, yeah, I'm doing the thing, right? Meanwhile, Guilty Gear is like, you learned how to get into a multiplayer match? Fuck you. That's the wrong mode, motherfucker, right? But if you're used to playing video games that kind of spoon feed you that feeling of progress, well, you're going to earn it in fighting games. And if you're playing multiple fighting games, it can actually be harder to get that feeling of progress because you're not spending all your time on one game, right? So the rest of this essay is basically about how to shift your mentality so that it's easier to get that feeling of progress and easier to stick with multiple fighting games. Because I play multiple fighting games, right? I actively compete in 2 Guilty Gears. As soon as locals are back, I'll probably be messing around with Uni again. I've been having some Marvel combos. Like, I'm doing all kinds of shit. And this is how I've learned pretty much since like day one of playing fighting games. Okay. So the rest of the essay is about this. I'm actually not going to go too much deeper into it because you can read it. You can read it if you want. But the next thing I wanted to talk about was a post on the fighter subreddit, which Sajam doesn't have a video about yet, so I figured I might be able to beat him to the punch on this one. And it's and the topic is playing fighting games for yourself. And this person, username sad guy trying, right? We really getting off the rip here, right? Is ready to pick a fight, right? Super ready to pick a fight. He's like, I'm sure a lot of people are about to disagree with me, but here goes. For a long time, I haven't been able to get into fighting games. I picked the game, try to play it online. It would be too hard and I would quit. Months or a year would go by and I'd try again and the same thing would happen. Obviously, I was turned off by the act of losing constantly. I think the thing that hurt though was that I didn't learn anything despite me attempting it, but I love fighting games. I felt that I didn't actually take time to enjoy the game, like really enjoy it. I also feel like I shouldn't want to be competitive in a game I don't truly enjoy. If I don't enjoy it, then I'm not going to enjoy it when I'm playing competitively. Anyway, I started treating fighting games as what they actually are, video games. Instead of putting them in a different part of my brain, I learned to love them for what they are as is. This person then goes down to write a description of like the Uni tutorials and how they're trying to do multiple reps of each trial, right? Which is actually a really good way to study and practice. But the neat thing about this is, and this is the thing that I love about Uni's tutorials and Guilty Gear's tutorials, is that you're in an environment where failure doesn't matter. You just keep on trying. And it feels very much like another typical video game, right? Trying to pass a combo trial is really not that different from trying to pass like a strict execution test in another game. Maybe you're playing Dark Souls, maybe you're playing Beatmania, fuck it, whatever, right? And then move on to the interesting part. This is the part that I think you will hate, but I wanted to take some of the combos from the combo trials and test them on a moving target. From there, I just went to arcade mode, right? And again, the rest of this is all like, and everyone says I shouldn't play against bots, but I did, and I'm having fun, so screw you, right?
Literally how I learned to play.
Yes, and that's what I'm getting to. So if you read the comments, everyone's like, sick, good job, you found it, good for you, right? I guess I have the top third comment up here where all I say is I'm personally a big fan of this approach with 20 upvotes. Shouts to me. But this is actually literally how I taught Irene to play Guilty Gear, right? I didn't sit her down and go, this is a combo, and this is Oki, and this is how you fucking block, and blah, 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 blah. Get ready to fuzzy some stuff, dumbass. No. I said, you don't think you can do a combo? Here's a combo you can do. It's pretty useful. And I think I taught her, it was like 5K, close S, like 2H, 2D, or something like that. Right? And I got her, it didn't take long to get her to the point where she could do that against a training dummy. Press these buttons, you good. I think if I set up as like an optional, like, oh, you did even better if you get 2D into card charge, right? Yuzuha says, I already know you didn't teach Irene how to block. Oh God, no. Are you kidding me? No one plays these games to learn how to block. But after she had that combo down, I was like, cool, now play versus the CPU for a week. Right? And she did Jam's arcade mode, and she ran through it over and over and over, and she saw Jam's story, like little story mode clips and blah, 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 blah. And she did that shit for a week, and she didn't get bored. She just kept on doing it. She kept on having fun. And then at the end of the week, I was like, cool, now let's give you another combo. And it wasn't really until for a couple weeks in that she really started playing against people. And even that was pretty early, right? She kept on playing arcade mode, that kind of thing. And the reason that I knew this would work is because this is also how I learned, right? For two reasons. One, we didn't have net play when I was a kid. So if I wanted to play against a moving target at all at home, I grew up only child, right? If I wanted to play against something moving, I couldn't play against people. I had to play against the PC, right? Or against the CPU. And like my first several hours that in the journey that would later become my competitive fighting game journey were spent in like Street Fighter Alpha 3 World Tour mode because it's tight. You get to go all over the map. You have all these weird dumbass fights. I won half of them by just doing round start Raging Demon with Akuma or Shin Akuma or Evil Ryu or any character that had a Raging Demon, and I felt like a fucking genius. And I unlocked the upgrades, and then every now and then I do jump roundhouse into crouch roundhouse, or I do jump roundhouse into mash Ken's Shoyu Reppa Super or whatever. I did that shit for probably 30 hours. And then I went to school because I was still in high school at the time. And this kid who I kind of knew was like, yo, you play fighting games? Cause he saw me messing around with like a ROM in the computer lab. He's like, yo, you play fighting games? The next day he brought Street Fighter Alpha 3 for Dreamcast. And I picked fucking Shin Akuma cause I knew how to jump back and throw fireballs, and he beat the shit out of me. And now he's one of my best friends. Right? This is how I learned how to play fighting games. Even when you go to the arcade, if no one's there to play you, you end up playing against the CPU like a good 70% of the time, right? This is just how you learn. I've described this in other essays as in martial arts, the concept we use is usually increasing resistance over time, right? So you have these when you're learning a technique in a martial art, another physical, highly coordinated endeavor, much like a fighting game, because it is a fighting game. It's not like the teacher shows you something and then immediately you start going for it in sparring, right? Because if you don't know how to do something, you're not going to learn how to do it better at 100% resistance where the other person's like, I'm definitely not going to let you get that throw, right? Or that submission or sweep or whatever it is. The way it works is you start out and you just watch the teacher do the thing, and then you pair off with a partner and both of you try and make it as easy as possible for the other person to do the move. Because the idea is you want to see just how it works. You want to imprint the body movements in your muscles, and you want everything to feel nice and light and easy. And then once you get like a couple dozen reps on either side, then you move on to like partner drilling, positional drilling, where you crank up the resistance to like 50%. You're not going full speed. You're not using all your strength and all your power. You're still letting the other person get the move, but you're putting up a little bit of resistance first so that they can get an idea of, oh, I need to set up this move by getting you to go step over here and then go this way. And then your weight is light over here. And so I take you over and blah, right? And you're getting the feeling of increasing competency, knowing that you're not getting that against, you're not playing against a real live human opponent. And then after that, you go for it in sparring, and almost no one ever gets it because everyone has that move immediately on their head. And so everyone's going to be defending against the shittiest version of this move because you just learned it, right? But you go for it again the next day, and then you go for it again the next day. And really, it's next week when the teacher is moved on to a whole different set of techniques. If you remember the technique and you like it and you keep on going for it, that's when you land it, right? The equivalent in fighting games is you start out you start out watching the combo instructions, and then you try and do it against a dummy. And then once you've done it against the training bot a couple times, you go ahead and you do it to a CPU at low difficulty, and then you crank the difficulty up, and then you try it again and again. And then finally after that, you do it against real live human beings because you've already had the experience of working your way up there. So this is all just to say, one, don't listen to most people who don't listen to anyone who's bad at teaching how to play fighting games, right? Your homie might have the best of intentions when when they give you the lessons that they've learned from their hard-worn years playing fighting games. But unless you've actually been through the process of teaching someone, you probably have no idea how your well-intentioned advice will actually play out in practice, right? If you want to give people the speedy route up to the level you're at, right? That is all well and good, but first they need to learn to love the game on their own, right? And that often comes with a much more gradual path. So don't rush people through it. Give people, certainly answer questions. Feel free to ask questions that will help people grow and learn, but do not rush people into playing against other people. One analogy that there are two kind of, there are two kind of equivalent activities that I like to compare to fighting games a lot. One is music and learning musical instruments, and another is learning a foreign language, because both of these things start you out in a place of extreme incompetence and awkwardness. And then over time, as you're strictly by putting the reps in, it kind of doesn't even matter really what you're doing as long as you're doing more and more of it, especially at the beginning. As you get the reps in, the better you'll get, the more fluid, the more fluent you will feel, the less awkward everything feels. And over time from there, once you have that base to work off of, then it gets much easier to expand the rest of your skill set, whether it's an instrument or whatever, right? And some people will be like, yeah, the first thing you got to do when you're learning a language is just immediately start talking to people who are fluent. And I get it, because that is where you learn the most, right? Same thing with music. Like, you'll learn the most from playing. But getting people to play, telling people that their time spent playing a fighting game against a human is the only time that's valuable, and telling them never to play against bots, telling them never to play in, I don't think anyone says don't play in training mode, but telling people to not do the things where they have fun is extremely counterproductive. The equivalent would be like, yo, you want to learn Spanish? I'm going to deport you to Mexico. You ain't coming back for a year. You want to learn to play an instrument? Good, because we got a gig at 5 o'clock. Here's a bass. You never played it? Well, this is a great time. This is the best way to learn. You think that anyone who's going to learn like that is going to want to stick with it? It's not just fighting games. Yeah, fighting games are hard, but literally anything else that has you performing in front of other people against other people is going to be rough. And so you got to ease into it, especially in the beginning. And so that's it for the rant. People have questions. I'm happy to take them while we open up for some Rev 2 lobbies. I see some conversations about learning how to play Guilty Gear and learning how to play Street Fighter 5. I maintain that Guilty Gear is a much easier game to learn than Street Fighter 5, but I already wrote about that. Y'all can check that out. It's in an essay called Why Complicated Fighting Games Are Weirdly Good for Beginners. And with that, let's go ahead and open up for some lobby action. Hell yeah.